Hello, faithful, and welcome to the 49ers Plus podcast. I'm Al Moriello, and this is your source for the most objective 49ers discussion. Only smart takes, never any clickbait. And today we're going to be discussing the 49ers falling to the Bucs 30-19. I'm going to start off giving my overall thoughts on the game. Obviously, we'll get into the devastating Fred Warner injury. We'll discuss offense, what was working, what wasn't. Same for defense. Special teams we'll quickly touch upon, and then my takeaways from the game and why all is not lost for the 49ers season. So let's get right into it. Niners fall to Tampa Bay 30-19. You know, the lead is obviously Fred Warner's injury going out in the first half. Gruesome ankle injury, friendly fire from Jair Brown. And ironically enough, on that play, there was only 10 defenders on the field. If the Niners had an 11th defender, there is the possibility that Warner does not get caught up in the wash there, and maybe the play plays out a bit differently. Always tricky to go back in time and say, you know, what could have, should have, or what if things could have happened differently. It's a devastating injury. The second, when Bosa went out, obviously how it affected the pass rush has been catastrophic. Now that Warner is out, that next injury makes it feel so much more debilitating, right? Because it was Bosa leading the charge for the pass rush, and now it's Warner who's essentially leading the charge for the defense and the team as the leader. We're going to get more into that. This first section, I just wanted to give my overall thoughts on the game. Listen, it wasn't a one-score game, and both the Bucs and Niners have played only one-score games so far this year, an 11-point difference, but San Francisco hung around and gave themselves a chance up until the last couple minutes of the game, last 2 minutes of the game, right? It was a one-score game. Even after the Warner injury, the 49ers found a way to take the lead 14-10. Close at halftime, close throughout the fourth quarter, third and fourth quarter. We're going to talk more about, issues on offense. But the Niners hung around, and I know Ibuka, the stud rookie wide receiver for the Bucs, went out around halftime or early in the third quarter with a hamstring injury, and I don't know if that's the football gods trying to help even things up for the 49ers. So then at that point, you have the Bucs down their top three receivers with Evans, Godwin, and Ibuka. Niners lose Warner. Niners are still without, obviously, Purdy and Kittle and Ayuk and Pearsall, Bosa and Warner on the defensive end. But if you told me Emeka Ibuka would go 2 for 24, no touchdowns, I'm like, the Niners are probably going to win that game, given everything else, or be really close, given everything else that Tampa had going against them offensively. Missing their lead running back, but I don't think Rachaad White really, missed a beat. The running game didn't go nuts for the Bucs. We'll get into that in a little bit. But, Rachaad White, I mentioned in the previous podcast, a higher yards per carry average than Bucky Irving. And until yesterday, Rachaad White had all the rushing touchdowns for the Bucs. Irving didn't have any. One of the backup running backs did get a rushing touchdown in addition to Rachaad White against San Francisco. The turning point of the game was obviously Baker Mayfield's 15-yard scramble for a touchdown. Travis Gibson and Bryce Huff were there. Baker Mayfield essentially ducks under Travis Gibson, was scrambling, but kept his body square downfield like he was looking to throw. Pump faked it a couple times, was able to escape. I think it was a Tatum Bethune diving attempt, and Baker stretching and reaching the ball across for a first down. Now, on that play, when you see it from a different angle, I'm not sure how Michael Williams was not called for, or the Bucs were not called for offensive holding on Michael Williams a couple times. Williams was still rushing as the pocket broke, and as Baker escapes to his left, going upfield, up the sideline, Michael's in the middle of the line being held by whoever number 68 is on Tampa Bay more than once. And the fact that wasn't thrown is surprising, but also devastating given the area of the field and the fact that the Bucs hit on a long touchdown right after that play. We'll get more into that in a little bit. So now listen, third downs, Niners were pretty good, 44%. Tampa Bay, 38%, 3 of 8. That's where you want to be. Now, third downs may be a little bit deceiving because the Bucs were maybe doing more damage on first and second down, but Tampa was 3 for 8. The Niners were 7 of 16 on third downs. And the Niners had a 5-minute advantage on time of possession, even though they didn't run the ball well at all. And we'll get into that, but lost the turnover battle 2-0. And let's transition now into the offense. Mac Jones goes over 340 yards, 347, no touchdowns, 2 picks. The first interception was on the first pass of the game. Bucs got the ball, punt, Niners get the ball. First throw, Kendrick Bourne essentially should run an out. You had McCaffrey at the top of the screen lined up as a receiver, Bourne as one of the slots. He decides to run an out and back in. Mac was expecting the out, threw it right to the cornerback who was covering McCaffrey, who came up on it. McCaffrey ran a stutter and go, giving Tampa Bay great field position deep in San Francisco's end, and they cash in with a touchdown. The second interception toward the end of the game, I mean, the Niners are actually only down by 8 at this point, 27-19. So Mac was fooled by the defense. Good job by Todd Bowles and company disguising coverage. There were players, teammates open underneath. He didn't have to force the ball down the sideline, overthrew his intended receiver, and it was intercepted, but he had options underneath. And Mac has been great with the taking what the defense gives him and checking down. Surprising he didn't do it there. But remember, that play or that interception was preceded by a 4th and basically a 1.5 foot. Jones did a QB sneak on third down, did not get it. 4th down, they might have been looking to QB sneak again. Dominic Pooney is called for a false start. You cannot go from a 4.5 yard to a 4th and almost 6, and now still go for it. So remember, 27-19. The ball was at the Tampa Bay 28. The penalty pushes him back to the 33. 5 minutes and 30 seconds left on the clock. Eddie Pinheiro is perfect on the day, and Kyle decides to not go for the field goal. And I would love to know Eddie Pinheiro from 51 yards versus converting a 4th and almost 6, what the analytics say about it. The analytics are always going to say go. But usually when it's like 4th and 3, 4th and 4, this wasn't quite 4th and 6. But with 5.5 minutes left, that means if Pinheiro connects, and even if he doesn't, it's still a 1-score game, right? But at least you're attempting to put points on the board. Who knows what happens? Even if Mac completes that pass on 4th and 6, who knows how the rest of that drive finishes up, right? Is there a strip sack? Is there an interception? Missed field goal, fumble, whatever. And I'm not saying, Pinheiro would have been an absolute, sure thing. He's perfect on the year. For field goals, missed his opening extra point at Seattle, but could have made it 27-22 with 5.5 minutes to go, meaning now you need a stop, get the ball back and score a touchdown. I guess, Kyle would want to, they're deep enough in Tampa Bay territory that if they don't get a stop or if they don't convert on 4th down, maybe then you stop Tampa Bay again, but then you still need to go to length of the field, score a touchdown, and get a 2-point conversion. I was surprised, he's trotted out Pinheiro on some field goals in situations where, against the Rams, he kicked a 59-yard. I was shocked by that during a tie game, when if he misses that, you give the Rams the ball back basically at midfield. Not kicking here with the amount of time left, 5:30, I think they still had 2 timeouts, was surprising. Mac took a beating again, sacked 6 times. The surprising thing about the sacks was that even though Todd Bowles is widely known as being a highly aggressive, blitz-happy coach and coordinator, the majority of the sacks did not come on blitzes. The 4-man rush just overwhelmed either McKivitz or Colby, Pooney. I think Jake Brendel allowed 2 sacks, 2 QB hits, and 2 tackles for loss. Something that did not have a good game. Listen, 6 sacks for a team that only had 10 sacks coming into the year. Tampa Bay averaging 2 a game. They got 6 against San Francisco. I don't think it's really an indictment on Mac holding the ball too long that game. And he was pretty efficient. We could say other than the 2 interceptions. Again, the first one wasn't his fault, and the second one was his fault, but he should have went somewhere else with the ball. The Niners did not handle the blitz well when it happened, and it certainly did not handle the 4-man rush well at times. Part of that could be because, again, the running game, not good, 22 for 67, and their first rushing touchdown of the year, courtesy of Christian McCaffrey. McCaffrey goes 17 for 54 and a touchdown. That's a little over 3 yards to carry. Brian Robinson, no carries. And maybe that's the way it's because of how the game unfolded. And you heard Tony Romo say it on the telecast, if they're going to beat Tampa, you have to throw the ball. You have to push the ball downfield. Bucs were only giving up about 90 rushing yards, per game. Obviously the Niners under that. The Niners under their yearly game average of like 84. So that's going to drop them even farther down the rankings for whatever it's worth. But Robinson got no carries. Noteworthy only from the standpoint that, I know Kyle wanted to get the volume up there, but to not even switch out. I think McCaffrey might have had 24 touches overall. Not terrible, but still, he's on, you keep hearing it, historic pace in terms of touches, which is not going to be good for him next year, regardless of what anybody says. But Brian Robinson was on kick return duties instead of Isaac Guerrero. Now, Brian Robinson is not a fast running back. Tall running back, runs upright, not as fast as Sky Moore. Isaac Guerrero is actually faster. I don't know if Brian Robinson came to anybody and said, hey, I want to get involved more. Can I do, kick returns? Or if they're, Isaac Guerrero is falling out of favor with the coaching staff, etc. Just that's how I noticed Brian Robinson was doing something in the game, was on kick returns. Robinson did have 3 receptions. He did come in for McCaffrey at times to spell him, but was not a factor in the running game at all. And I don't know if it would have mattered because the running game wasn't a factor at all. And lastly, receivers, Kendrick Bourne. You can't have a big day with Kendrick Bourne without having a drop, which he did, but he went 5 for 142. Second straight game with 142 receiving yards. Jake Tonjes, 6 for 58. I really hope Kyle finds a way to keep him involved when Kittle comes back as another viable pass-catching option. I hope it's not only going to be Kittle and Farrell because it's, running sets or whatnot. Would love to see more Jake Tonjes. He has earned it. And Kyle said in, previous weeks that Tonjes has given him more trust to call plays for him. The trust thing with Kyle, I get it to a certain degree, but even if you don't trust your tight end, you have to be calling plays that involve them, maybe not as a first read, but still as a viable receiving option in the passing game. But Tonjes has now become that. I think he's got 24, 25 receptions on the season. And McCaffrey went 7 for 57. So another game for McCaffrey, over 100 all-purpose yards for whatever that's worth. We learned after the game, Juwan Jennings, first game back, was out last week. He's playing through 5 broken ribs, which he broke 2 games ago against the Jaguars, has a high ankle sprain, low ankle sprain, shoulder injury. I'm sure you know that there was some sort of a sideline spat with Kyle before halftime. Both Jennings and Kyle didn't go into what was going on, probably just both being competitive, but Jennings did make a point in the locker room to make people, usually everybody's hush-hush about injuries, but Jennings, it seemed like he wanted to make it known that he's playing banged up. And, other than just letting people know that, I don't see, maybe people are thinking, oh, Juwan's a trooper, he wants to be out there. And Juwan even said, he's like, I'm going to be out there as long as I can be. Maybe he wanted to couch his not great performance of 1 reception, 7 yards, and a really bad offensive pass interference when the Niners were driving, that could have ended up in a touchdown. And that's, as good as Eddie Pinheiro was kicking 4 field goals, and 2 of them were from 50 plus. If one of those other 2 field goals ended up in a touchdown, then you have a 30-23 game, theoretically, with the Niners getting the ball back with less than 2 minutes to go for the tie, potentially. So it wasn't necessarily red zone woes, but still, and it's great to get points as opposed to not getting any points. And it's great that Pinheiro is an accurate kicker. All these things are pluses, except for the fact that This is a game where they needed at least one of those field goal drives to end in a touchdown instead. Now let's transition it to defense. Again, guys, minimal pressure on Baker Mayfield. We should not be surprised at all. There was one sack. Michael Williams, congrats to the rookie getting his first on the season. Baker was comfortable. There was pressure also, again, on that big play where Baker scrambled for 15 yards, but not in a consistent enough manner to affect Baker at all. Now, Baker ran the ball 3 times for 14 yards. So the other times, it's weird because he had a 15-yard gain. And then if he ran twice for -1 yard, there should be, I guess, one other sack on the ledger for the Niners, right? Because if you're running for a negative amount of yards, that's behind the line of scrimmage, that's a sack. I don't know how that works, but pass rush, an issue, which led to the pass D being an issue, especially when Fred Warner was out. You saw how it opens up the middle of the field. Even when Fred Warner was in, you had other linebackers taking bad angles to running backs, crashing inside when it was clear that the running back was bouncing outside. Now, easier for us to see from the safety of our couch with a bird's eye view or an angled view of the game versus kind of being behind everything. But I don't know if that's gap integrity, experience, awareness, or just being fooled. But San Francisco had some run defense plays where they definitely could have played it better. Now, Tampa Bay, the run D wasn't terrible. 26 for 104 and 2 touchdowns. So that's 4 yards to carry on the button. Not terrible. Rachaad White himself, 17 for 65. That's less than 4 yards. And Sean Tucker went 6 for 25 and a touchdown. Rachaad White had a touchdown as well. A little over 4 yards a carry. It's hard to have issues with the defense for the past couple of weeks because Bosa's out. We knew the pass rush was going to be an issue. And now Warner's out, which means communication and pass coverage, especially in the middle of the field, is probably going to be an issue. But the end of the first half was really bad. That's when the Niners went down, or I don't know if they got a touchdown or a field goal. Wound up, I think, getting some points. If I'm misremembering, I apologize. Left the Bucs with less than 2 minutes to go, and Saleh starts completely soft. You saw all cornerbacks playing off. Linebackers were off. And Baker just went down the field with no opposition. Mind you, Tampa Bay had 3 timeouts. It's not like Tampa had no timeouts and Niners were just playing the sidelines and just saying, all right, take whatever you want underneath. We're just going to give up. At worst case scenario, we're going to give up a touchdown. That Baker drove down the field, and then there was a miscommunication with a man in motion. Nobody picked up the man in motion and went right down the top sideline or right sideline, wide open for a walk-in touchdown. Now, we're going to need to expect communication issues with Warner not being on the field. He's called the defensive plays since 2018. So now it's going to be on Tatum Bethune, and I don't know if they're not going to bring anyone in free agent-wise. I don't think. So it's either going to be Bethune. I don't know if they give a look at Curtis Robinson or Luke Gifford or whatever. It looks like it's going to be Bethune's job, but that needs to be cleaned up somewhat. It's not going to be solved, right? We can't go from Warner not being in one game to Bethune playing, and Bethune playing probably middle linebacker against Atlanta on Sunday night and expect that all this is going to be resolved. But if they can cut these communications in half issues, that will go a long way towards hopefully every week making some sort of an improvement. Quickly, just kind of going back to the defense overall, we talked about Baker's scramble. That was obviously so big because it was a 3rd down, and it led to another wide open touchdown. Got about 5 yards behind Marquise Siegel to make it to get the Bucs up to 20. I think it was maybe 27-16, whatever it might have been at that time. Baker's 2 touchdowns came on broken plays. Now, Baker is playing at an MVP level. I'm not taking anything away from him. But this is a game where Mac Jones had more completions than Baker Mayfield had attempts. And the Bucs were down their top 3 wide receivers. They were running the ball okay. They got a gift on defense that first drive that the Niners were on offense, interception. They only needed to go about 20 yards, if that, for a touchdown. So that's basically gifting Tampa Bay at least 3 points, but they turned it into 7. I like Baker Mayfield. I like how he plays. He's tough, the moxie. I didn't come away from this game being overly impressed with, let's say, the 2 touchdowns because they were gifts, right? They were absolute gifts. And the Bucks, obviously the Bucks got the 30, but the difference in the scoring was Bucks scored more touchdowns than field goals, and Niners had more field goals than touchdowns. The math works out that way. Like we've always been saying, Kyle can move the ball pretty well between the 20s or between the 30s, but then has difficulty stringing things together. And however much we want to say it's a byproduct of players being out, the Bucks were without their top 3 receivers, top 2 receivers for all game, top 3 receivers for the second half, and Mayfield still found ways to make things happen again on broken plays. As much as the Bucks won that game, the Niners' miscommunication and confusion and having young players back there gave the Bucks the game, lost the game, right? And again, the Niners were still hanging around and the Bucks weren't pulling away. 2 mash unit squads. But think about, those 2 touchdowns. And again, if one of them is defensed, maybe it doesn't turn into a touchdown. Maybe it's a field goal instead of 23, 20 to 27, it goes to 23. And maybe, every point scored or allowed for San Francisco from here on out is going to matter. And it's not only now until we get, the Niners get their offensive players healthy, including Ayuk if he comes back at any point this season. But now the defense is operating at a significant deficit. We're going to talk about that a little bit more. And I think it's another game, and I'm curious to see, I've said this before, how Salah adjusts, if at all, the presence, the energy on the sideline, the keeping players amped up, better schemer, better play caller than Nick Sorensen. I get all that. And I've said it before, and I'm going to maintain it. Salah's all gas, no brakes philosophy to me means all bend, no break. There's no pass rush with the front 4. You're not helping him out with blitzing. There's no Fred Warner in the middle. It's going to be Tatum Bethune. How do you help Bethune out, if at all? Is it another linebacker? Do you play 3 safeties? Do you drop Malik Mustafa down? Is there anything schematically you have to do differently? I don't want to say Salah plays a vanilla defense, but you can't just keep rushing 4 without Bosa and hoping that your secondary, which is young, your middle linebacker, which is young and not Fred Warner, and there's a lot of youth on the defensive line as well, that all of those levels of defense are going to work synergistically for the majority of plays to get the stops you need when you need them. I wouldn't care if they got beaten on a blitz, if the blitz happened and, the team just beat man to man or whatever it may be, but you can't show, and I don't even know if that miscommunication when the Bucks were going from right to left and it was a walk-in touchdown on the top left of our screens, if the blitz actually happened or not, but no one picked up that receiver that went in motion. So blitz or not, there's got to be obviously better communication. I'm curious to see if Salah, and I know the answer to this is no, but I'm just going to keep saying it because maybe I can wish it into existence. I'm curious to see if Salah gets more aggressive in a way that helps mask the deficiencies on the line and at linebacker without Warner. Guys, when you think about these injuries, just real quick, it's not just the fact that the Niners have injuries. It's the fact that their injuries are all to all-pro or Pro Bowl caliber players. It's not like they have backup players. I mean, Yator, Kevin Givens, I get, Robert Beal had an ankle sprain and he's been cut, but it's Purdy, it's Kittle, it's Ayuk, Pearsall up and coming. JJ was down for a while. Obviously, Demarcus Robinson was suspended for 3 games, and it's all pros on defense in Bosa and Warner. It's not just the fact that they're injured, which is a big, because the quantity of injuries, the players on IR that may or may not return. Yes, that's a big part of it, but think about the who. who's actually injured. Insult to injury because it's such big name players. And it would just be so hard for any team to overcome this. And if you want to say the Niners aren't the deepest team in the world, okay, I'm not going to disagree with you, but name me a team that can withstand the injuries to so many big name players at different positions and the opposite of a logjam at receiver that they've had to work through. And they're still 4-2. And people still think the sky's falling. We're going to get there in a second. Special teams, thank God for Eddie Pinheiro. He kept it closer than it probably should have been. Perfect on the day, 2 from 50 plus. I would have liked to see maybe him get that opportunity from 51 to make it a 27-22 game instead of going for it on fourth down, because you knew Bowles was going to dial up something that was going to give the 49ers some issues. And the only other thing, we talked about Brian Robinson returning kickoffs instead of Isaac Guerrero, who really cares about that, but Sky Moore and Jim Nantz thought it was ridiculous enough that he had to make a point of it. Brian Boyer, again, get your head out of your ass and tell Sky Moore to stop fielding fucking punts inside the 10. And you know what? Stop fielding fucking punts inside the 5. That should be, they have nobody else to return punts right now, so that's just him. But tell him at some point, Sky, look down and see where the fuck you are. Or I would just be fine every punt. Don't keep anybody back and let it just bounce wherever the fuck it's going to go. I don't know if this is Brian Boyer saying, oh, special teams, we're going to play aggressive. It's playing fucking dumb. Both times, Moore did not get out to the 20 against the Jaguar game. It was him fielding a punt that led to the Arizona game? I forget, the safety. Stop fielding punts inside the 10. Like it's fucking ridiculous. And I don't know if you're as steamed about it as I am, but this should not be an issue still. The first time it happened, I guess, was against Arizona, right? When they got that safety. Sky Moore got away from it the second time. He learned. I thought you learned, Sky. Instead of continually looking to the sky, look to the ground. I'm going to start calling you Ground Moore, because I want you seeing where the fuck you are on the field to get away from the ball that's going to land at the 2 or 3. And again, if it bounces directly sideways out of bounds, all right, it's at the 2 or 3. Chances are it's going to go into the end zone or upfield. Just get away from the fucking ball. My God. Now, key takeaways from the game. There's no sugarcoating Warner's injury in any way, shape, or form. If you want to look at anything, like Bosa's injury, it's early enough in the season that hopefully he is on track for a week 1 return. Getting hurt in week 6 is a lot different than getting hurt in week 16. All right. So that's, if anything, it's going to give Tatum Bethune and other young linebackers snaps. Nick Martin, who has been inactive the first 5 weeks of the season, is probably going to be active now. Who's going to take Fred Warner's spot on the roster? If Kittle comes back this week, it's Kittle. But at some point, they need to make room for Trevis Gibson. He's a hard, high motor player. Robert Beal has been cut. Yator probably still going to be dealing with a hamstring injury. They can only elevate Gibson one more time. At some point, Gibson needs to be on the 53-man roster. And you still have Ayuk potentially coming back off of IR, and Curtis Rourke, who knows at quarterback if they're going to open up his 21-day window. But I said last podcast, he is so far behind everything. What is he going to show you in 3 weeks that you would want him on the active roster instead of Adrian Martinez? It should be a red shirt year for Curtis Rourke. And I do want to look into, if that's the case, does his contract toll? And would the Niners still have him for an additional 4 years starting in 2026? I'm not sure. Ultimately, listen, Bosa going down is one thing. Warner going down is another, because of the compounded nature of it. Your 2 leaders on defense, your defensive leader in Warner, and really the team leader, team captain. He's the one that speaks to the team. Then you have the locker room component, right? Like these are, it's a brotherhood. These are friends, people that are like bullshitting on planes and in locker rooms during practice. Now you have your 2 biggest guys that everybody else on the defense looks to is gone. Who is the next person up? Is it Demo? that's going to take on some of that responsibility? Is it Mustafa? I mean, he's only a second-year player. I don't know if he has that personality in him, or Jair Brown or any of the rookies going to do that. Jordan Elliott, Curtis Robinson. I don't know. I don't know who, and it doesn't matter. It shouldn't be Tatum Bethune just because he's going to call the defensive plays like Fred Warner was, but there should be if not more than one defensive voice on the Niners that can keep the energy up, rally the team, even if it's 50% of what Warner does or 70%. They need somebody. And if it's just good, if it's Saleh or a collective energy from everybody, since there's a lot of youth, ultimately, though, the best defense is going to be a good offense. And the Niners sound like they're going to get Kittle back against Atlanta. Maybe they get Pearsall back too, but I'm going to say no when he comes back against Houston or the Giants. At some point, Brock will be back. At some point, Ayuk's going to be back, and Ayuk probably sometime in November at this rate. The Niners are going to need to start winning, outscoring teams. Saleh's defense, say against Atlanta, if he can hold most teams to 20 or around 20, the Niners are going to have a good shot at winning. Some teams are going to score 24, 27. You saw the Bucs get to 30. It's going to be on the offense, honestly, to play clean games, limit turnovers, like one at max, because the Niners aren't getting any. And last game represents 13 straight games without an interception. That is the longest streak in NFL history. At some point, they'll get one, and they'll probably get one in a game that they're getting blown out, and it won't even matter that they get one. But you can't count on the defense for takeaways. And at right now, you can't count on the defense. Not like we were expecting them to be a dominant unit at all this year. But for them to be a top 15, top 16 unit in the NFL might be asking a bit much of the team, the squad, and what Robert Saleh is working with. So again, the offense is going to be the best bet of offsetting what the Niners now have going on defense, because those injuries aren't coming back this year. At least on the offensive side, you have people who are returning. It's just a matter of when. Defense, they're done until next year. Guys, it's a 4-2 team. It's not a 4-12 team. Sky is falling, all this stuff. Like, if they probably weren't a Super Bowl team just missing Bosa. They're definitely, or close to definitely, not a Super Bowl team now without Fred Warner, but they're 4-2. They're atop the NFC West. They have tiebreakers over the Seahawks and Rams because they beat them once already, and they play them both at home in Santa Clara later on in the season, where those are going to be potential big wins for the division or maybe for a wild card. But looking at the schedule, at home for Atlanta, at Houston, at the Giants, at home for the Rams, at Arizona, at home for Carolina, at Cleveland, bye week, at home for Tennessee, at Indianapolis, at home for Chicago, and at home for Seattle. Even with this depleted team, you could say that all of those games are winnable. I'm not sure that the Niners would be favored in all of those games, but they are all winnable games. And you really have to give the Niners the nod in games like at home against the Falcons, at the Giants. I know, between Jackson Dart and Cam Scatterbo, there's a little bit of a resurgence there, but the Giants still aren't a very good team. At home for Carolina. Yeah, they're 3-3, but still the Panthers. At home for Tennessee, probably one of the two worst teams in the league. At home for Chicago, I'm not a believer yet. Those are 5 games right there that if they get those, brings them to 9 wins. That means one of the remaining 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, if they can get one or two of the remaining 6 games, Houston, the Rams, the Cardinals, the Browns, the Colts, or the Seahawks, if they can get 1 or 2 of those, that's 10 or 11 wins, and that might be enough to win the West, especially if they can beat the Rams and the Seahawks, or at least one of them, whichever team looks like they're going to be tracking higher in the NFC West. And those two teams, Los Angeles and Seattle, have to play each other twice. So there's still a path to the playoffs. There's still a path to winning the NFC West. And if you're going to be that type of fan that says, oh, why make the playoffs? Why win the NFC West? They're not going anywhere. Just tank and we'll get a better draft pick. No. 1, once you get into the dance, who knows what can happen? 2, we don't know how much this team is going to grow and get better as the weeks go on, especially the young players on defense. And also the players getting back on offense. This could be a team where the offense is humming, probably except the running game, But overall, the offense is playing at a high level. The defense is playing good enough to allow the Niners to outscore teams. Yeah, it's not a Super Bowl year, right? Doesn't feel like a Super Bowl year. But if they can win a wild card game and get to the divisional round, and maybe they're at someone like the Lions or the Packers or the Eagles, or I would go to at Tampa Bay again. Like they'll probably be healthy. Or even say at the Rams or Seattle. There's all bets are off, right? Every week you see upsets in the NFL. Every single week. And I'm not saying like, oh, well, if they get an upset in the divisional round and an upset in the NFC Championship, I'm not going to go that nuts. But on top of, you're obviously going to play out the string, and you're only 6 games in to a 17-game season. What about the development of the younger players? Giving them a taste of winning football, giving them a taste of the playoffs, so that maybe next year and 2027, when you have Bosa and Warner back, Bosa and Warner will be back in 26, but looking at 26, 27, as years where the younger players really start to come into their own. You still have more draft classes and free agency. A lot of the players that they have are going to be retained. Who knows about JJ? Maybe they bring Kendrick Bourne back instead of Juwan Jennings. Just given like what Bourne has been doing, the past couple of games. Maybe not, but I'm just kind of throwing that out there. The season is not lost, and there is still a path to win the NFC West. There still is. Again, a 4-2 team, guys. That's why it was so important to stack those wins early. And they have the Falcons coming in, a very winnable game. Now, this leads into trade possibilities. They're not trading for a linebacker. I don't know if they're going to sign anyone off. They're definitely not trading for a linebacker. The only, Eric Kendricks, I think, is a free agent, and he was the first choice over Devondre Campbell last year, but Kendricks signed with the Cowboys. I don't know if they kick the tires there, and I'm not sure who else is available from a free agent standpoint, but they're not trading for a linebacker. If they trade for anything, it's a defensive end. But you have to ask yourself the question, now that Warner's hurt, does it make sense to make a trade at all? Is even a Trey Hendrickson going to put you over the top to really feel like you are making a run for the Super Bowl, or at the very least a deep playoff run? Here's how I would look at it. 4-2 now. If they can win 2 of their next 3 games, that gets them to 6-3. So if they beat the Falcons, lose to Houston, and beat the Giants, that's 6-3, 2 days before the trade deadline. Does John Lynch take a swing? Now, if he takes a swing, I wonder if it's not for someone like Trey Hendrickson. Do they go after someone like Thibodeau from the New York Giants, who, even though his 5th year of his contract in 2026 is guaranteed, at least they have him signed for another year. Someone like Bradley Chubb they've been linked to, even though that's a high money acquisition. Miami is absolutely terrible. If they can get something for Bradley Chubb, maybe. Carl Granderson from the Saints signed beyond 2025 as well. And maybe it's a player that would only cost maybe a 3rd or a 4th, or something that they have an extra pick, or maybe a 3rd, 4th, and then a pick swap in a later round to give, this whoever they're getting it from, feeling like added compensation. The open question is, how much draft capital are you as fans, we as fans, even though we have no say, John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan, and Jed York willing to part with to supplement or improve the roster this year? Essentially, we're just talking one defensive end. If they feel like there's so much going on depletion-wise, and we haven't even talked about who's going to get hurt against Atlanta, who's going to get hurt against Houston, who's going to get hurt against the Giants. I mean, I wouldn't make a trade up until the deadline, because you don't know what your team's going to look like. They're losing people every game, and we're not talking about for weeks or a week. It's multiple weeks, months, if not the whole season. So no need to pull the trigger on Trey Hendrickson this week. I guarantee you Kittle gets knocked out for the year, and somebody like Demo Renardo Green, and then it's like, why did we trade for that person? So I would absolutely wait until the last minute, see how the defense is playing, see what your record is, most importantly, and see how many players on the offense you're getting back, and make that decision of, all right, We're starting to fire on all cylinders, or most cylinders, on offense, because I feel like the running game is still going to be an issue all year. It's like, if you haven't figured it out in 6 weeks, what makes us think that it's going to be figured out in week 7, 8, 9, or 10? Other than how much is Kittle going to add as a blocker? Is that really going to matter? I mean, you see the inside of the line get blown up so much. That's not Kittle's responsibility. Will having Kittle and Pearsall as receivers make the defense respect the pass more so they can't key on McCaffrey and Brian Robinson whenever he gets his next carry? Maybe. But if these next 3 weeks they stay relatively healthy, the defense holds their own, and the offense elevates the play of the entire team, then on November 3rd or 4th, which is a Monday and Tuesday, then I think you can consider strongly at 6-3, if they are 6-3 or 7-2, if they win the next 3, but 6-3 at the least, then you can consider bringing somebody in to make a run. We're going to be talking Niners Falcons either on Thursday or Friday. So this was just the reaction show. Fred Warner, so tough. It's going to be hard for that defense to overcome their 2 best players being out, but let's see what Saleh does. And at least it's a somewhat soft landing going home to face the Falcons versus maybe going home to face the Rams or the Seahawks, or if they had to play the Eagles, Lions, something like that. But that's going to conclude the podcast for today. Like always, I want to thank you for taking time from your busy schedule to make us part of your listening or viewing routine. Niners fall 30-19. Listen, I had them losing this game. I had them 3-3 at this point in the season. So they are performing over my expectations. I know some fans maybe have even more unrealistic expectations of me. Oh, they should have won this game. They should have won the Jaguar game, et cetera, et cetera. And I keep using the word greedy. When you're in games like the Niners are, you get greedy for those wins because you never know when the bottom's going to fall out. And this Warner injury feels like the bottom now has fell out of the defense or potentially the team. But let's see how Saleh and Kyle can keep everything together for a schedule during a schedule or a stretch of upcoming games that are imminently winnable for San Francisco. This is sadly the beauty of a 4th place schedule. But whatever you guys are doing between now and when we speak again, stay happy, healthy, and safe all. We will talk soon. Take care.